Kevin Sutter here with a knife video for you, and today we're taking a look at the new for 2019 Spyderco Native Chief. All right, now this knife, I've got to say about this, if you're a company who has a long-standing reputation, who's had a ton of big successes in the past, has a lot of well-loved things out there, it makes sense because it's a known quantity to look back into those well-loved products from the past and use them as inspiration and as marketing for new stuff that you're going to come out with in the future. Okay, it just makes sense. Look at how many live action Disney movies we have coming out right now, because Disney knows people love these movies, and especially those of us who grew up with them are going to pay good money to go and see the live action version. Okay, and so guess what? If you're Spyderco, you know the Spyderco Native is a known quantity. People already love it. There's dozens of positive reviews out there. There's tons of dedicated fans. And if you can use that love to market your next knife, it just makes sense to do so. And this is not the first time. Of course, we've already seen the Spyderco Shaman, which is very closely based off the Native design but bigger. And now we have the Spyderco Native Chief, which again is based on the Native design but bigger. And both of them, by the way, are great knives. Now, let me say this. I'm not offering this as a criticism. Okay, I'm the first one to say to all knife companies out there, yeah, if you've got a knife model that has done really well, but it's a little small, making a bigger version is always a win. You guys know I like the bigger stuff, and so that's great. And when it comes to Disney, we took our kids a couple of weekends ago to see The Lion King. They loved it. Nancy and I, my wife, had a good time. We liked it. And it really is just a scene-for-scene remake of the original. And that's just fine. Now, this is not a scene-for-scene remake of the Native. When you take this and just stretch it out, that does make some changes. So this is a significantly different knife, despite the fact that you can very, very clearly see that a lot of the design cues are coming from the Native. Now, I would say the Shaman is essentially a Native just sized up. Okay, now that's not entirely true. They've done some. There's some differences. Okay, this knife is not. This knife, in terms of its width, okay, it's about the same as the Native. All they've done is kind of stretch it out here. And again, that's fine by me. I'm a fan. This is, absolutely the Ginsu 2000 or 10,000 or whatever version of the Ginsu knives we're on these days. This is a knife that's meant to cut. And if you like knives that will cut stuff, I think you're going to be pretty happy with this knife. I like the things that they've done right off the hop, but I'll get into some of those specifics as we kind of work our way along in terms of changes from the original Native or from the Natives that I've handled. I think there probably is out there somewhere a G10 backlock Native, but I'm not totally confident about that. So confirm or deny that in the comments down below. Okay, so here we have a knife that is 9 1/8 inches overall. It has a 4 1/16 inch blade, 5 1/8 inches on the handle, 4 3/8 grip area. So that is not including the choil. That's just from here to here, 4 3/8. So even if you have really big hands, you've got lots and lots of real estate here because you still add another 7/8 of an inch for the choil. So almost an inch for that choil. And so tons and tons of real estate there on the handle in a knife that only weighs 3.9 ounces. Okay, that's the same as a para 2, and yet this is almost a full inch larger than a para 2. And so if you're one of those guys who complained about the fact that on the para 2 you don't get a lot of cutting edge, well, this definitely remedies that situation and may be a great option for you. Certainly it's a great option for you if you're like me who likes the Spyderco Native, but kind of wishes it was a little bigger. Well, this is more than a little bigger. And by the way, I think that makes sense. If you made this sort of, 8.5, 8.25 inches, it would be so close to a Mannix that I don't think it would be worth making. But this does put it in a slightly different category, which I do really appreciate. So size and weight is fantastic here. 9 inches of knife, a good 3.5 inches of cutting edge in a package that carries like it's not even there. I'm really, really happy with that portion, the size and weight of this knife. I'm also really, really happy with the blade, which is what we want to look at next. So there you can see Sal Glester's Maker's Mark. It is Golden, Colorado, USA Earth, in case you didn't know that. And we have S30V steel. Look at that beautiful grinder satin from the Golden Factory of Spyderco. I've got to say, I like the finishes on the Golden Colorado Spydercos a little bit more than the Taichung Spydercos, although I like both an awful lot. So you can see how the Taichung Spyderco has sort of more noticeable, heavier grind lines, while they're a little bit finer on the Golden Colorado finish there. Big long knife blade here, not very thick blade stock. In fact, it's quite thin blade stock. It's quite thin behind the edge. So overall, you have a knife here that's really, really designed to slice, and slice it does. Okay, now let me say this about, making a knife that cuts. If you're going to do a full flat ground blade and you want it to really cut stuff well, then you kind of need the thinner blade stock. All right, that's not a super hard and fast rule, but this knife, because it's such thick stock, is going to cut better than this knife or this knife. All right, now that's not a trade-off I necessarily always want to make. In fact, there's a lot of reason to carry this or this over that, but we'll get to that when we talk about comparisons. All right, so very thin, very thin, very slicey blade, S30V steel, very thin behind the edge. Now, the one complaint I do have about this blade is look how fine that thing gets out at the tip. This is not a knife you're going to want to be dropping. It's not a knife you're going to want to be putting any side-to-side torsion on whatsoever. That tip is going to be a little fragile, so you have been duly warned. All right, but let me say, from a user standpoint, if you're the kind of person who uses your knife for cutting stuff, all right, you are going to like this knife. And if you're the kind of person who is pretty careful about not putting any undue strain on your blade, okay, you're going to like this knife. And I absolutely like it. It really is, as I said, the Ginsu 2000 of Spydercos. It just slices like a dream. Great, great, great blade for cutting stuff, which is really what a knife is all about. Now let's talk about the action a little bit. This is a Spyderco lockback. It is very well done. It definitely reminds me of the Manix lockback that I had in the past, and I really like that knife as well. Very precise, very clean, very comfortable. If you're used to cold steels, this is going to be a little more comfortable for you, and I get why a lot of people like that. Now, I will say the 8010 would be the exception. The 8010 is a little smoother than this, but most of your cold steels, your American Lawman, your Recon 1, those kinds of things, they're going to be a little stiffer and a little tighter to deal with than this lockback, which is pretty comfortable. Now, knowing that stuff, it's important to point out, this is not a really drop-free type of knife. It's a knife that, because it's a lockback, that spring tension is always pushing on the tang of the blade. Okay, so you're always going to get a little bit of friction there, which is going to slow things down. If you just have to be able to flick your knife open, or if you really like to Spidey flick your knives, probably not going to happen with this one. Maybe some people can do it. I know I certainly can't. And if you're wondering, let me just try and demonstrate there for you. Not even close. Okay. But the thing is, this is not a knife that's designed to be a fidget toy. It's a knife designed to cut stuff, and that it does really, really well. And of course, it's a knife designed to lock up securely and inspire some confidence that way. And again, it does that well also. When you're locking, unlocking, opening, closing this knife, it's very comfortable, very usable. You don't feel awkward. You're not wondering where to put your fingers or trying not to cut them or anything like that. So from a user standpoint, if you just want to open your knife and cut something and then close it after, it's great. No complaints whatsoever. If you want something that is going to be, flickable and drop shut and all that stuff, then you're going to have to look elsewhere. Okay, now moving on to the handle, we have a handle design that I really like, or a handle construction. I've talked about this in all kinds of knives, the number of cold steel knives, and a number of Spydercos, including the Manix lockback. No steel liners here, just G10, which is absolutely fine. G10 is a really tough material. We do have steel inserts for all of the four-way repositionable clip screws. All right. The only issue I have with this clip is I'm not in love with the hole in the middle of it. I get that it accommodates for the lanyard hole. I don't love the lanyard hole placement either. Okay. So we got a lockback, so fully closed in construction. Fairly accessible. I mean, you could clean this, you could blow it out pretty easily. And so in terms of construction and fit and finish, I'm quite happy with this knife. Okay, I have no real complaints, other than I'm not in love with the hole, but that's, you know what I mean? That's a very, very nitpicky thing to say. There it is closed, just to give you that one little close-up again while we're talking about this. The next thing to talk about, of course, would be how comfortable is it in hand. I remember a while back someone commented that they hate that term ergos, but we're talking about ergonomics or ergos right here. I don't know why reviewers say that. It is kind of a goofy way of phrasing that, but it kind of makes it fun to say that it drives a couple people a little bit crazy. So, very comfortable knife in hand. Is it the most comfortable knife I've felt? No, but it's definitely fine. I would say it's not quite as good. And here's the thing: the Native, its big claim to fame was how perfectly it fit in hand, and it really did that. Okay, and so this sort of had some big shoes to fill. And in this grip, okay, which is basically how you would hold the small Native, it feels very, very good. Back here in a backed off grip, it's not quite as nice. And I will say this, I rarely found myself using it this way. I virtually always use the knife in this grip, and that's what I would probably continue to do. So, that does bring the question, is the rest of this handle necessary? I mean, I think it's fine. I'm just saying for my own uses, I pretty much choked up on the knife every time I used it. In other grips, like in a hammer grip or something like that, it's also good. I mean, this is a fairly comfortable handle. It's not as nice as something like the 8010 or the Ultimate Hunter or the original Native. It's not quite as nice even as the Para 2, which, everyone talks about as being just a really, really comfortable knife in hand. I did have someone complain about that one time. He's like, man, you clearly don't know what you're talking about. If you think the Para 2 is comfortable, you're an idiot. And I'm like, whatever. Okay. The Para 2 is very comfortable. I don't know what you'd have to do with it to make it uncomfortable. It's fantastic in hand, and I have done tons and tons of cutting with this, and rarely do I ever wear gloves. So I'm not protecting my hand in any way or coming at this without having put quite a bit of use on that knife. So, are the ergonomics good? Yes, it's quite a comfortable knife. It's not the most comfortable knife I've ever felt, but it's certainly very, very good, and a knife that lends itself to being as usable as this knife does. You do want it to be comfortable in hand. This is not a collector's item, okay? This is a user, and it has a grip to match, all right? Very grippy, very comfortable, no issues whatsoever. Now, I want to bring in a couple of comparisons. First off is the Spyderco Amalgam. Now, an interesting comparison here, and I may need to make a full comparison video between these two. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in something like that. There's a lot of similarity here, but there's also a lot of difference. The Amalgam is perhaps a little more comfortable in hand. It still gives you that choil, although the choked up position is maybe not as nice as it is on the Native. The blade is one of the big differences here. So the Amalgam blade is meant to be tough and durable more so than slicey. Now it still slices well. I'm certainly not complaining, but it's not going to slice as well as that super thin blade on the Native Chief. The other thing is the Amalgam is going to be the fidgety knife. Okay, it spider flicks really well. The flipper works just fine. And so this is going to be the knife. If you're the guy who always wants to be fidgeting with your knife, this is going to be more the knife for you than the Native. But, that's really, I don't know. As a reviewer, I feel almost bad even bringing that up because a knife is not a fidget toy. It's a cutting tool. All right. And so, the Amalgam beats it in that category. They're very, very similar. Okay. Now, here's the thing I've said about the Amalgam before. It's designed to be a user. It's actually designed to be a pretty heavy duty knife, especially the blade grind on here. But then it has bearings, which kind of makes it a little less heavy duty. Not a lot. You can use, if you were using this in the field for prolonged periods of time, you just want to have the ability in the field to clean it up. So, you may have to bring your knife tools with you or some extra lubricant, WD-40, stuff like that to clean it and lubricate it. All right. Let's see, what else do we have here? Of course, we should bring in the Para 2 because it's such a well-known Spyderco and because everyone's familiar with the size of it, weight of it. The cool thing about this comparison is these knives weigh the exact same amount, and I would even argue that this is less noticeable in pocket because it's actually thinner, okay? So if you have this in your pocket, you really hardly even know that it's there, while the Para is a little more noticeable because of the extra girth that it has. Otherwise, these are not super comparable knives. Anyway, uh, I really like both of them. These are hard knives to compare. They're not nearly as comparable, I would say, as the Amalgam was to this. Now, I do want to bring in another knife which has similar ergonomics and some similar design choices. And again, I think this is designed to be a user knife, super lightweight, so around 4 ounces. Lots of handle real estate. Once again, has this nice big choil for you to choke up. Once again, thin behind the edge, flat grind. Okay, so a lot of similarities here. And honestly, this is going to be a little less of a user because of its price point. I think this is like 140 and this is probably, I don't know, close to $300. So there's a significant difference in that regard. But in terms of, making a blade that slices really well and a handle that's extremely comfortable in hand, these are very, very similar. And I could see them appealing to some of the same people. Certainly, they both appeal to me because I like larger knives. I especially like the fact that I can carry, in both of these cases, a large knife, but have something very lightweight that I hardly even notice in my pocket. One last knife, and I brought this one in because it's interesting that this knife is very slim, fairly lightweight, definitely a blade that cuts well, and perhaps this kind of offers you that bit of a fidget factor that you don't get from this knife. Now again, there's a bit of a price difference, but I think these are actually pretty close. You can probably pick one of these up for between $100 and $150. And Dave over at Tuya Knives tends to do some promotions on this knife pretty frequently, so you can probably get one for a pretty good price. All right, a little bit heavier, but this, if you're a guy who really likes the titanium frame locks, if you like stuff a little higher end, this can scratch that itch for a pretty affordable price point. So those are just a few comparisons for you to kind of see how this stacks up and whether or not you're going to like it compared to perhaps some knives that you already have or have knowledge of or experience with. Overall, what do I think of this knife? I think this is a really, really nice knife. It cuts extremely well. It's very comfortable in hand. The price point is reasonable, maybe a little expensive for what it is, but overall, I think this is a win. Okay, it works. Right, and this is definitely a knife designed to work. It's not a knife designed to go in your safe or to, impress all your friends. This is a knife designed to cut stuff, and if that's what you're looking for, I think you'll be very, very happy with this. I know that I am quite impressed with it. So, use my link down below to White Mountain Knives to pick one of these up for yourself. I'm pretty sure they've got some in stock. That's where I got this one. Huge thanks to Justin for sending it out, and huge thanks to all of you for using and following those links, as it does help the channel. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Maybe you're a native fan, maybe you've got a Shaman, and perhaps also let me know if you'd like to see a comparison between this and the Amalgam. I think that would make a rather interesting video. Thanks for watching again. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.